All right. Welcome back to another episode of Recharging the Human Battery radio show. I'm joined today by my co-host, Mandi, Dickey, who often does this on her own. I'm Dr. Stefano, Sinicropi, your friendly orthopedic spine surgeon, talking about random stuff on the show. Glad you're still listening to us. Anyway, we're on AM 950 radio today, and we're just going to have a chat about some really interesting topics. So this last weekend, I had the opportunity to go out to Harvard and do my very first TEDx talk, which was on light therapy. We'll talk about that a little later, but it's more about the idea of TEDx talks and how important this openness is in where we are going in medicine. You guys, tolerate myself and Mandi complaining about the current medical system and how broken it is. And I'm sure we got to touch on it a little bit. It's just what we do. But the truth is, I think that we're both frustrated. We'll get into it on the other side of the break, but we're both frustrated by the fact that there are certain concepts that can be so helpful to the population at large that are not getting out there because things are so ingrained in our brains. We're so brainwashed and siloed and think that we know like all these concepts, and we don't. And I think that what we really share and why we do the show together is we've both kind of woken up to really how much we've been, and I mean, you're a nurse practitioner, so you haven't had that as much shielding as I have, but how much I wasn't taught in medical school. So anyway, back to the TED Talk, and I want to really talk about my experience on the other side. Is really interesting. But the kind of the goal of TED is to really get people's ideas out. So like ideas that can change the world. So this particular one that we did was just about like how we can help like just the globe heal and things like that. But I think that this idea of really allowing people to voice their thoughts and have that discourse among ourselves is something that's really missing. And I think that it was just such an interesting experience. And I got to talk about something I'm so passionate about, which is light therapy. And it's a very receptive audience too, because that audience, I'm doing the talk, they're all into it. Meanwhile, I give it to doctors and they're like, when is this going to end? Because I've never heard of this stuff. So this guy must be just making stuff up. So don't you think it's like but like that whole concept? And I know you were just saying that yeah, you're waiting to hear back if you're getting a TED. So what say you?
Yeah, I think the audiences at TED are more open-minded because they're there to learn new things. That's the whole purpose of TED Talks, is to learn new things and express new ideas that people haven't heard before. So you're going to get a more receptive crowd there. It's just a different kind of people that listen to that. I wish we could get that same mindset in our colleagues.
There you go. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's hard to kind of feel like you're talking to a brick wall sometimes when you're talking about new things. Even getting back into concussion care, it's kind of an uphill battle with some people that I work with as well, because they just haven't seen it. They've been in practice 20 years and they know what they learned. And we've talked about it on the show before, just learning new things, being open to new things. If it wasn't something that you were taught 20 years ago, you don't think that it's a real thing until maybe you experience it like I did. Yes. as the patient side of things. And I learned so much from that experience that it's just a different world practicing now.
Yeah. And again, sometimes I'm not even joking. I feel like some of our colleagues with some of the things we talk about are more likely to believe stories about UFOs like that are the most like obvious AI generated, nonsense that you've ever seen, like crazy lights over some city, that they are to believe that, like, for example, light therapy can help in brain injury. Yeah. It's the most I've never seen anything like it before. We're going to talk about this on the other side of the break and how important it is to have an open mind. I'm going to talk about some of the talks that were there too. I mean, completely different, but it's just an interesting process. So I do want to talk about that. And I think it'll help you to prepare for when you do yours, because it's quite the experience. So we'll see you on the other side of the break. This is Recharging the Human Battery radio show. We are an AM 950 and we will see you in a sec. All right, we're back. Recharging the Human Battery radio show, joined by Mandi, Dickey. My co-hosts, we're on AM 950 radio, and we are going to talk today about having an open mind and what that all means, and we'll just have a nice conversation. I'm sure you guys will appreciate this, because I'm sure there's people in your lives that you have something that you're really passionate about. Not only are you passionate about it, but you know it to be factually based. Right? It could be anything. It could be like, for example, for you guys in Minnesota, for the last couple of weeks, I've been telling everybody how much better Minnesota Timberwolves lineup is than the Los Angeles Lakers. But yet these experts, so-called experts, because they're in LA, because apparently everything in LA, if you're just called LA or New York, you're better than everybody else. And no, it's bizarre. It's the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. So anyway, a lot of times people are wrong, and you just can't, it's hard. It's hard to get through. And so we'll talk about some of that, but first let's start with this. So this experience about doing a TED Talk. So again, what attracted me to it is now that I've gone down a path that is very radically different than what I thought I was going to be going down. And I have been frustrated because I do give a lot of talks. I do lots of speaking. I talk to people individually, and the barriers to even start the conversation are really tough, because again, if it's not a medicine or it's not a surgery, in our society, people don't want to hear it. Yeah, there's a lot of lay people that want to hear it, but to be honest with you, our colleagues, they don't want to hear it. They just, that doesn't work. Oh, who's this? What's Pfizer doing? What's Eli Lilly doing? It's not like, hey, what are these, holistic people doing? What is this doing? What is this? Anyway, so decided to do the TED Talk. Was really excited because I got to talk about light and laser therapy at Harvard, and I'll get into some of the stuff, because obviously Mandi's going to know, even though she hasn't seen it, because it's not released yet, and you haven't seen the transcript. But we could talk about it a little bit. But before that, it's the concept. So the concept is that you go into this big selection process, and usually there's a lot of people. So it's probably 1 out of 10 people that apply for whichever TEDx talk will get accepted to it. So you apply to this thing and you put your big idea, the idea that the whole world needs to hear. And I obviously I'm going to ask you what the idea. I have an idea of what you. I'm pretty sure I know what you want to talk about. But anyway, you want to put this thing out. So I was really excited. I tell you, the application for the Harvard TEDx one, I'm like, am I applying to the med school, or am I just applying to give a talk about? So I don't know why I couldn't just write a couple paragraphs, but they make you go through this crazy application process. Anyway, got selected, was really excited, and so got to go kind of through the program with the other TEDx speakers as they prepared to do it. And then the talks are they're all different. I mean, there was a couple of other, physicians that spoke, and I'm going to talk about one of them because it's very interesting. But so you do that, and then, so first they scare, they're like, oh my God, they make it seem like it's like the like so much, I don't know if I want to call it pressure, but it's like this process. You need 6 months to get all this stuff. Anyway, so then they get everybody anxious, and I understand why now in retrospect. I get it. I understand, because otherwise you move at such a slow speed, and then you won't be ready for your talk. And it's hard to give a message in 15 minutes. So you have to be really polished, before you do it. So anyway, so we went through this whole process, got a chance to listen to everyone's big idea right away. And it's just interesting to say, oh, wow, I never thought of this. I never thought of that. So you go through the process, and then it gets to be crunch time, which is like about 2 months before, because you have to hand in your final talk. So of course, with my procrastination ability, which is really quite good, I kind of waited till the last day and put it together. But then I sit there in this deep work. I got it done, send it in. They liked it. They made very few changes, to my talk, which is cool. Then you got to practice this thing. So unfortunately, when I start practicing the thing, and I don't have a ton of time in my life, but practice, because you have to be focused. I'm giving Mandi a lot of tips, by the way, before she goes down this path, because you really need, these are important. You need to set aside time that's like, it has to be quiet. Like you can't have a phone. You can't be thinking about like your kids, nothing, because you just won't, it's impossible to remember. But the interesting thing about doing it is I thought that was the final version of my talk. And it was about like 8 versions before my final version. Because when you start giving the talk, you're just like, oh, I'm missing this point. I'm missing that point. Oh, this is really what I want to do. So you just really got to think about like, what is the information? Who's your target? Because the target is not necessarily the people that are sitting there in the audience, right? That might be 100 people or 500 people or 1,000, right? Like a big tech talk would be considered like 1,000. But it's who is your what is the information if this goes viral, like if 500,000 people watch it or 10 million or 30 million, whatever it is. And so it just kept changing. And of course, in my style, the talk kept getting longer and longer and longer. So then, I'm about 2 weeks out from this deal. And I start thinking to myself, my God, this thing's so long. How am I going to memorize this? I had so many points and stuff like that. But yet I insisted that this is what I'm going to do. I was like, I got it. I'm going to do this. I got it. I had all this cool stuff. But so because you just feel like if I have this audience and this is now going to be on like the TED site, I need to get every point in because people are not listening and they need to. So the interest. So by the time I went to my, the audition, which was the day before, I was like way over. And I was also editorializing the whole thing. So I was just like throwing, because I was like, I got to throw this in. So like literally while I was doing the talk, I just decided I had to throw other things in. Like, for example, that the brain is connected by like 100 trillion connections. And that's more than, than the stars and probably and all the stars in the universe and all this stuff. And next thing you know, I was like 8 minutes over. So even though people like to talk, the people that, because we all kind of watched each other's talk and they brought in all these students at Harvard to watch the talks and make criticisms, people liked it, but the organizers didn't. They're like, what are you doing? You're like way over. Yeah, it's cool. I said, sorry, I went into radio mode. I can't help myself. So I was like, just let me just take a brief moment. It was nice because my wife was around, like my wife was there in town. So she kind of helped me out. So we had to, even though if I had read it verbatim, I would have been on time. We had to trim it because I just know what I'm going to do. I can't help. It just comes out. It just comes out. So anyway, we cut it down and I was able to get through the talk. And like I was telling Mandi, I thought my biggest worries about the talk because of my style was that, like something in the memorization process, I'm like, oh, I'm going to forget something or something like that. Actually, the biggest struggle I had was like fighting with my voice because I had practiced so much that my voice was hoarse by the time I did it. So I'm like doing lozenges and like drinking tea and all this other stuff. And it was interesting because the way they set up the microphones at this particular event, they did not have like a mic that was connected to speakers unless you used a handheld mic. So that was like just something that, we're just not, I haven't really seen that in TED, so I didn't really want to do that. That was the only way to do it. They set up some some 18, like something. But anyway, so I was talking to like this auditorium and I had to talk really loud and I was struggling with my voice. So I'm like going and I'm like I'm gasping and I'm just thinking, and then I just had to think, I was like, I could get through this. My voice will be okay. Cleared it a few times and got through it. But what an experience, because you don't know what the thing is. So the next time I do one, I'm so much more mentally prepared to do it. You got to get all those kinks out like 2 weeks before. You can't go into it still thinking, oh, I want to change this, I want to change that. There's only so much message you can get in 15 minutes. You can't like talk about like the entire history of something you can hardly do that in an hour with the stuff I'm talking about, but it obviously not possible, So anyway, got through it, real excited about it coming out. But I'll talk about some of it. I want to just go like, to you now, hearing what I said, do you still want to do a TED,
Oh,
a TED or TEDx?
absolutely.
So, okay, good.
So I think my advantage there is that having had the brain injury, I have to practice what I do all the time anyway. So my talk that I gave at the Minnesota Brain Injury Alliance last week, I practiced that one a million times, and I had all my cues memorized of what I needed to do at what different points. Thank God my brain is healed enough to do that.
It's awesome. It's great.
But mine was an hour-long talk, and I only went over 1 minute because people were asking me questions in it. But I had it like timed out to the second where I needed to be. So that part, I think my style from that is probably a little bit different. Gosh, the weeks you're not here, I have my notes. You have no idea. I have everything planned out.
I know you always tell me that. You're like,
I'm OCD and I'm a nerd.
I'm like, notes? Who needs? I don't need. I mean, that's why I like radio stuff, because we could just talk and we could just go into these other things. Your topic, I'm assuming, is going to be about your own personal journey, which are which are the most powerful.
Yeah, personal journey and the lessons I learned and why we need to be open to learning new things. So funny that we're talking about this, because it's all about being open to keeping an eye on what's happening now, what's the new things that are coming up, and if I have time for it, talking about the fact that you can't just focus on the big medical journals. You have to look at all of the medical journals, because there's evidence. There's evidence for red light therapy. Yep. Hasn't made it into the mainstream stuff, but it's there. There's so much evidence that people just aren't looking at.
No, it's fun, because the personal stories. So there was one of the TED Talks. So there were 9 of us. Okay. And that's a big TED event, like 9 speakers. That's a lot of speakers, for the audience to go through. And it went really well. People enjoyed it. I was a little worried because I was after lunch. I'm like, people are going to be yawning and doing stuff, but they were pretty fresh. I mean, it went really well. But there's this guy, Gustavo, and it was the most moving one for me. I didn't see them all because I was kind of, practicing. I heard them all like between the day before at the thing and whatever, but it's funny because I didn't see his run through, but I did see his actual one. It was very moving. So this guy, he's like a foster kid, and he was going from home to home. And he just talks about like how important it is for us to mentor and extend the hand. And so he was like so desperate. This guy was like living in his car. He's like 17, 18 years old. And he's like, he didn't know what to do. So he remembers there was somebody that had, because, people are like, oh, call me if you need help and whatever. But half the time it's just like, you're just filling, people are just filling the air. They don't mean it. So he calls this lady, and he just was thought that they were going to have a conversation because he just needed to talk to somebody. He was so desperate. He didn't know what to do. So he's like, you know what? Hold on. So she started talking to him. She's like, let me call you back in a little bit. So she called him back in about an hour. The phone rings. He picks it up, and she's like, you know what? Let's not continue this conversation. Why don't you come over to our house? We really need to have a deeper conversation. So he went to her house, and they took him in. And then he fast forwards, through that. Long story short is he got like a great education. He did everything. And now he's, like a professor at Harvard and helping other people and mentoring and doing all this stuff. It was actually pretty emotional. It was a short one, but it was very powerful because he talked about his own personal experience and his life. But I like the theme of that. And that was that when somebody calls you for help, are you going to pick up the phone and answer that call? It was really powerful. So he just started asking people in the crowd, like just staring at them, saying, when that phone rings, you're going to pick it up, right? Because look at what it did for me. And that's the whole thing about TED, is because, you just get all these people together, you hear their stories, and they're all over the place. Obviously my thing was totally different. And there was other ones on leadership, on business, on the economics of global, climate change. Not that I understood anything, I didn't that's the very finance world, global G7 countries and stuff. That's not my world. We stick in our little space, but it's amazing. Like you get out all these other, pieces of information. I bet you that's one that you would have enjoyed a lot, that talk, because you're there and you're trying to mentor people and doing those things. And I think it's great. There was another one that was really interesting. That was she's a pathologist actually. and out of Columbia, my alma mater. And she, one day, like it was a really busy day, and she was just going through all these pathology specimens. And normally you don't pay attention, right? You're just working. You look at the pathology. This is this cancer. This is another cancer. This is whatever. It's an infection. So she just realized, she just started paying attention. She's like, all these people with cancers that I'm seeing today, they're like 25, 35, 40. So she just started thinking about it and started becoming obsessed with that particular topic. And so her whole talk was about the fact that we're essentially poisoning our children with the food that we give them. And that's why people eventually are getting all these chronic. It was perfect. Her thing ties in exactly, with she was 2 after me, but it ties in perfectly with all the stuff that I like to, rant about. And I did, in my TED Talk. But she just talked about like the food and how we need to make it like a lot of teaching in school, and how like in Japan, it's so different than our system, and just health across the globe. And she said, you need to I learned all these little tidbits, even though my kids are too old now. So it's too late. I was like, I needed this talk a long time ago. But she's like, you need to be introduced to like a food 5 times. It's like, it's not that kids won't eat the broccoli. It's that you have to put it on their plate every time. And it's like the 5th time that they finally like will try it. And then I don't know if did you do anything like that with your
I introduce things to my kids all the time. They ate what I ate. I didn't. I always told them I'm not a short order cook. I'm not making separate meals for everybody. What I make is what you're going to eat. And they had
could starve.
They had to at least take 1 bite of everything. And it came to a point where I would tell them they had to take the number of bites that they were number of years old. So they hated it once they started getting older, because then they had to take more bites. But I have kids that eat vegetables and fruit, and they don't like eating fast food because it's not as healthy. It doesn't taste as good as the other stuff. So that's just what I did with them.
Yeah. And I think my wife was good about doing some of that stuff. I wasn't when I was around them, because I'm so busy in my career, I just kind of let them, I would push, here's the problem with my style and the whole parenting thing. We're going off, obviously we're going crazy. But my whole thing is that it's just like, you're absolutely right with what you do. It is, you're like, like, do as I do, not, as I say. I'm the opposite. Like, do as I say, not as I'm doing. Even though I'm healthy, I would just complain to them, but I wouldn't really like take it away, from them, which I should have. Now, luckily, they both have doing really well and done really well in school and all that other stuff. No, no thanks to me, for sure. My wife was more of a stickler. You got to eat this, and kind of forcing them with the broccoli and all that stuff. So, it was a combo. We'll say it was a combo. It was certainly not a whole clean thing. But, one of the other things that she said in her talk, which was cool, and she tied it all together. It was actually a pretty cool talk. And then she asked she was just like, and the nice thing about introducing the kid, because they just tell you what's on their mind. So she asked the kid, she said she was like touring a school or something like that. And she just asked the kid, like, what's your favorite subject? And the kid said lunch. So she ended it with, well, let's make that their favorite. If that's going to be their favorite subject, let's teach them about it. Like what to eat. So it was pretty cool. And they're like, kids just say, they don't, like, we would never say that, right? Yeah. Unless we're joking or clearly joking, but kids just say like they're real.
Well,
like,
they just speak their mind.
Dead serious. What's your favorite subject? Lunch. Okay. So it was really cool. And there was some other like leadership talks and some other things, but the audience, it's interesting because you're there and you're just getting all this diverse stuff. And in a way, it's a lot more interesting. I mean, listen, if you're going to nerd out on peptides or spine surgery or brain, whatever, right? That's different. But the truth is, in those conferences, you're going to lose half the crowd, even the people that's their profession. Because after a while, hearing about the same, things constantly, it's tough. It's tough to do unless, again, like I said, you're like so dialed in, especially if you're like in Hawaii at a conference and it's 75 and sunny. You kind of, after a while, you're like, I get it. This is what I've done for 20 years. I'm going to go out and, and check out some of the waves or whatever. So it was cool because you get their attention because you're going from one topic to the next topic. And that's the way most TEDs are. They're ideas that people want to spread, and they do try to kind of connect them, in a certain way. But anyway, I'm going to get into like my talk a little bit because this is stuff we talked about. So my opening story was about this guy that we might have mentioned it on the show before. But it was, I thought it was a really powerful way to get them. And it really, I think it really hooked the audience. There's a lot of shaking heads. There's this UPS driver that, that fell and hit his head and had a concussion for 9 months. He was like slurring his speech and he had all this, he was tearful. It was actually one of the saddest visits I felt bad for the guy. I like wanted to hug this guy. The guy's like 60 and he's like crying in my office. And he was just sent for neck surgery. So anyway, I sent him over and he got his first treatment. He got transcranial and he got some like poly light. He got some green and red light. And it was the first time that he could speak coherently for 9 months. The first time he came out of that and he's like, holy smokes, I can speak. Now, again, you need multiple each time, gets better, but that was just a powerful, way to introduce people. And I talked about, and to be honest, and the reason I used that particular one is because I've always been big. I mean, we've been talking about this brain stuff for a long time, but I remember when that happened last year, it really did make me internalize and say, oh my God, this is like bigger than I thought, because these people are devastated. And if light has the potential to do that, we need to harness it in every way possible. Again, in conjunction with other things, there's other treatments for concussion, but mixing it all together was just a great way for me. And then I just went into, there's a lab right here in Cambridge, right? Dr. Casano's lab, and they're doing amazing work. And there's so much potential for, we're just scratching the surface of what we could do with light therapy. So that was the way, to engage them before I got deeper into the science and stuff like that. But, it's kind of, and it's not like always like that, but even when you had your first kind of treatments, even though you definitely crashed after them, but you did it's almost like when you put light on the brain, because you're stimulating blood flow instantly. You're lighting up those mitochondria instantly. So all of a sudden they wake up. Hey, we're working better. Like you just wake up. It's like I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Awakenings, right? Robert De Niro's frozen, and then they give him L-Dopa, and I like the guy. Robin Williams walks in, and they're playing I don't know, like pool or something. I don't know what they were. I don't remember what they were playing, cards. Yeah. And these people were frozen, catatonic state. So. It just reminds me of kind of like that experience, and everyone's different. I mean, there's people, it's a slower process, but some people, especially when they're early, when we get them early, man, they wake up quick and they recover very rapidly. Obviously, this guy's 9 months down the road. You were even further.
I was 6 months when I got the first treatment.
Oh, you were 6 months. Yeah. So you're in that same.
It was very similar. I hadn't been able to get a full sentence through for a long time because I would lose my train of thought in the middle of a sentence. So there was would never have been a radio show. That would not have happened. There was no podcasting. I don't know that I could have followed you. Even listening to you, there was not I couldn't do it. So. It was dramatic at that point too. Heck yeah.
No, it's bizarre. So and again, we just keep talking about it. So and there was a whole part of my talk kind of at the end where, because I went through all these diseases and all these things, and I just said, you know what, this might sound too good to be true, and I'll tell you why. The reason it sounds too good to be true is because we've been conditioned that complex medical problems. When I say complex, it's like there's not an exact answer. Complex. Require complex but expensive, like really expensive solutions. Like you need to have some crazy, like Star Trek-y, medical devices put on you and all these meds and all this stuff. And it could be a lot easier, than that. But going back and people loved, I mean, they were soaking it up because they're like, that's true. Like, why? And I wanted people to open their minds. Like, why do you think the way you think? Like, what is the barrier to at least let you explore things? Again, we're not giving you some pill that has all these side effects like all the commercials we see. We're saying put light on. If it doesn't work, guess what? You had a light on your head. So it doesn't matter. It's like it's not going to do anything harmful. Anyway, going back, the crazy thing about the brain and absorbing the light is so it improves the blood flow, which is shown on all the functional MRI studies and all this other stuff. It changes the lymphatic flow, and that's been shown. So it's called the lymphatic system. And so I talked about that in my talk. It's like the sewage system of a city. Think about a city when they go on strike and all the garbage bags are in the thing, or the sewage system breaks, or there's some sewer leak, right? It stinks in there and everybody gets sick. That's what happens to your cells. So if you get that sewage system moving better with the light, you're going to do better, right? Your brain can heal. And that's why, like, you get all those plaques and tangles in Alzheimer's disease, because it's a sick environment. So everything just kind of falls apart. The neurons die, the synapses die, all this stuff. And so, then the other two things we talked obviously about mitochondria, because they absorb the light, and I went into all that mechanism. Tried to not to lose people on stuff. So I just said I was talking about, like, they're like tiny antennas that can receive certain wavelength, instead of talking about, like, cytochrome, and all this stuff and enzymes, because they forget it, not in that crowd. But the big one, which I think is exactly what's happened to you over time, is that when you do things like light treatment, okay, it stimulates the mitochondria, but it also increases brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is huge. Now, yes, it's true. Like, people say, oh, you could get some of that from exercise. It's not the same explosive amount of that. And then combined with other things, when you do that, it creates synaptogenesis. So think about every single disease that we're dealing with the brain, all of them. They deal with neuronal loss and bad connections. If you can create new connections, you can create new mitochondria, something called biogenesis, and then you can literally create new brain cells in some cases, right? Neurogenesis. This isn't like, I'm not making this up because I want it to be that way. This is just science. It is what it is. If you do that over time, it's the brain plasticity, it's all that stuff, but you literally are putting the brain back together. And then utilizing, like, other modalities, which I know, like, you've done, neurofeedback and all these other, these other things, or just practicing for a thing. That's how you put your connections back together. Yep. Or playing an instrument, or doing crossword puzzles, right? Because you're kind of rewiring in a different way. You're just telling the signals where to go. You can really rebuild the brain. Why are we not talking like this? We're talking about drugs that just mask the symptoms, or giving you back, like, one thing, like in Parkinson's, right? You give them L-Dopa, right? You're giving them the thing that's missing. Why not fix the cells that are creating that? And that's what you're doing with light therapy, with other things, with transcranial magnetic stimulation, with exercise, with all kinds of things. So does that not excite you?
Yeah.
That this brain is not fixed? Like, it can be broken, but it can be fixed.
Yeah. There's so much that we can do. And for so long, we've thought that it is just like you said, give medications to cover up the symptoms. But I don't like Band-Aids. For one, I'm allergic to them. But for two, I just don't like Band-Aids, because it doesn't fix the problem. It just covers it up. And you can only cover something up for so long before it starts to become a major problem. It's like sticking duct tape on something to fix your vehicle rather than actually fixing the vehicle. It doesn't work. You can't do it. So finding that root cause of what's actually causing it and fixing the mitochondria. And that's something I didn't know before my injury, is that mitochondria actually get damaged when you have a concussion.
Absolutely.
So they get paralyzed, they can't create energy, and then you can't get better because you have this energy deficit. So why not fix the mitochondrial problem? And then it kind of has that cascade that it fixes everything else, rather than just putting a Band-Aid on it. You're just drinking an energy drink. That's not gonna work.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's exactly right. Like, rather than getting sleep, you take caffeine pills, or even worse, you take whatever medications your doctor gives you to stay up. There's all kinds of meds. Just get your sleep. Get your sleep. And you go right back to the mitochondria. Like, mitochondria needs to be a household word, because it's literally the thing that powers everything. So when we think about biology class, you see the cell and you'll see like 2 mitochondria in there. The truth is, in the brain, there's like 1,000 to 2,000 mitochondria per cell. It's the craziest thing. The only thing that has bigger and more mitochondria is the heart, because obviously it's going crazy. It's literally an energy. It's a pump, right? But the brain has so much work to do. And the fact that if people think about it, so you have thousands of mitochondria in the cell, and they're more like localized around the axons and the synapses, like where really the work is done. That's where it's transferred. But that whole entire chain going up and down those neurons, they're all powered by mitochondria. When those things don't work, everything's slow. You can't think. You can't find that memory. You can't speak well. It's so obvious. I've honestly, before I went down this path, I swear, I've never even heard anybody in any formal training talk this way. People don't even talk about this stuff. And it's the craziest thing. So the brain is 2% of our body weight and expends 20% and uses 20% of the energy we take in. That's how much. And guess what? It creates a lot of trash. And so number one, it creates even more trash when your diet is crap, when you're not eating good foods, when you're consuming garbage. So it's like all this stuff. And I don't even know, like, I'm sure there's a way to quantify it. And I'm sure AI is going to help us figure out, well, how much of my bad brain is because I'm on, on TikTok too much? How much of it is because I'm having potato chips, 20 times a day? How, what, and so on. But that doesn't matter. But the bottom line is we are taxing our brains to the max and not feeding it the right fuel. It's not working right. And then we're not taking out the trash, and all this stuff is in there. And guess what happens? You get dementia, literally. Not figuratively, not like, oh, my memory. No, you get dementia, which is why early dementias, and yes, some proponents, genetics, this and that. Yes, there are some genes, but more of it is environment than it is gene. Yeah, there's very early dementia that it's a genetic thing, but everything else, and actually you could slow that too by doing these other things. But it's amazing because if we can then target those root causes, okay, we know. So I had a whole paragraph. I had a whole thing. I wish my voice wasn't hoarse, but anyway, that's a whole other thing because I'm like, I feel like I have so much information to give you guys, but I can't talk, but I'm going to do it anyway. So if the enemy, so I had a whole paragraph about inflammation. I was like, what is everything? It's all inflammation. So I say inflammation does this. It's a complex cascade. I tried to do it as lay as I can, but the way I ended that paragraph, I was like, here's the good news. We know the enemy. So now we can attack the enemy of inflammation. And again, yes, it's lifestyle changes, all this stuff that causes inflammation. But what if you had a tool like light therapy, and we could mention, 20, others. Just light is very easy. It's low cost. It could be done in third world countries and under, service. Why don't these clinics have light therapy in and we'll call it the hood? Where the people get, what do they get? Drugs for their diabetes and their cholesterol and everything, which is the drugs are killing them. Or they could just have light beds. Yeah. We're in those wellness centers. That's not a wellness center. It's a drug center. You're going to see your dealer to get more drugs. I'm sorry.
Pretty much.
What else is it? Yeah. You have these, like the people's A1Cs are 13 and you're just, come on, man. Let's get down to but anyway, if we have inflammation and we have something that dramatically reduces inflammation, proven, not made up. Me and Mandy, we're not like, light, it's great. Like look at these lights. Like our inflammation. No, this is like scientifically shown. Why are we not doing that? What's the problem? Why am I getting so upset right now? Why am I so upset, man?
Oh, there's so many barriers. Yeah. I think that's the problem. There are so many barriers. Yeah. People are stuck in their ways of thinking. They have learned that you have X problem, you give X medication. And that's the way that the medicine is taught. So I think, no offense to any of you guys that go to med school, but you go in.
No offense taken.
You go in with a sense of common sense, and you come out with none, because you are retrained. You're brainwashed to think that if somebody has a disease, you treat it with this. So no matter how many times they say lifestyle in med school, it's not something that sticks, because nobody wants to change their lifestyle.
They say it about 6 times in 4 years.
So
it's 4 hours. 4 hours of training.
I think we had lifestyle 6 times in an hour in nursing school, but you come out brainwashed thinking that you have to give a medicine for everything, and you're never taught about how to actually fix the problem. And some of it, there's a little bit of job security in that. If somebody's always sick, you always have a job.
There's a lot of job security, not a little. It's a lot, because they keep coming back.
I would love to have no job security at some point, so that the people don't need to come see me. But concussions are always going to happen, so I will always have a job too. But we need to get into a different set of thinking, where we start to look for other things that can help. And what's the new things? What new things have we seen? Because there are new things in society causing problems. We need new answers for them.
And sometimes the new things to us are old things that never caught on, because I'm sorry that those powers that be, we're not conspiracy theorists on this channel. Sort of, not, but a little bit. But It's true. The big conglomerates, the medical industrial complex does not want anybody to know about these things because it doesn't help anybody, including my usual bit, my normal business. So anyway, we'll pick this up on the other side of the break. We're on AM 950 radio. This is Recharging the Human Battery. Hopefully you're fired up as we are. We'll see you in a minute. Okay, Recharging the Human Battery family. We're back. We're on AM 950 radio, and we're having a little chat about what is wrong with everybody, that they just don't get it. It's so, obvious to me. You know what? I feel now that I'm doing all like the stuff like the TED and the radio show and the podcast and I've just learned so much. I'm like, I wish I had learned this stuff 20 years ago. Without even joking, do you know how many people that I just felt like I had no tools for them? I potentially could have saved their life. So I don't know what happens to a lot of these people, because obviously I'm a spine surgeon. People would come in and say, well, we're either going to fix you or not. And I was, like I said, I always say on the show, I was always into the diet and exercise. And some people do it and some people don't, no matter how much you jump up and down. But having a huge set of tools to be able to help people is something we all need to have. And we need to be honest with ourselves in the medical community. We need to give people way more tools than what we're doing, because if you're the only one they're coming to see for whatever reason, you have the potential to save their lives, change the trajectory of their lives. Don't you think it's so crazy? I think if we could take one message away, and like in the spirit of like TEDx, is we just need to have open minds, but listen to all these different tools that are available. And it's whether if it's medicine or how to handle being homeless or lunches in schools or whatever it is, we need to provide people with the ability to be, again, let's use Margaret's term, the CEOs of their own health. And if we're just like, oh, I don't know what you want me to do. I'm a rheumatologist. You're talking to me about this thing. Or I'm a spine surgeon. What? You're depressed. What do you want me to do? Wrong attitude. We need a complete attitude adjustment in our field.
Yeah, it's you have to think openly now. There's not an option to do otherwise. I had a patient ask me the other day if I've always done what I'm doing now, and I honestly said, I'm like, no. I have been doing this since 2012 as a nurse practitioner, always in neurology, and I thought I knew a lot about concussion before, but it's so much more now. I'm talking about hormones with people, because a concussion can affect your hormones. Decrease in testosterone for men, decrease in estrogen for women. Nobody ever talked about that before, about the fact that it can actually kick women into menopause. Like, nobody talks about those things. They exist, but we don't talk about it because we are stuck in silos, again, back on that silo thing. And we don't think about how everything else is affected. And as I'm going through with patients on all the different things that they can do, I've referred a couple people to Hypercharge because they absolutely needed it. I've had some that came in and they had long COVID and then they had a concussion on top of it. I'm like, well, you basically just had 2 brain injuries.
That's the perfect, by the way, that is the perfect example where light therapy is miraculous.
Yeah. So all of these things, if I had not had the experience that I did, I wouldn't know these things. And I had a patient the other day say, well, I'm sad that you got in your car accident, but I'm really glad that you're here, because I have that extra information that I can share with them now that I didn't before. And it shouldn't take a car accident for us to do that. It shouldn't take an injury for us to be able to realize that there's so much more that we can offer people. Well,
yeah, we need to be shaken out. And in your case, obviously not good. Obviously, I don't wish that on anybody what happened to you, but certainly you're a different person. I went down this path for different reasons, but very similar. Speaking of concussion, it's funny because I know, because I was doing all this reading on concussion and trying to keep up with you and really like becoming an expert on concussion. But now I'm actually doing like an official certification on the way, because you can get like certified in concussion through this Carrick Institute. So I'm thinking, and I'm down the path. I've been doing it for a couple months. It could take me the rest of the year. I'm thinking I'm just going to go in there and it's going to be like an easy thing. The amount of articles that I've had to read that are so intense about biomarkers and this and that. I know 20 times more about concussion in actually studying it and really sitting down. So again, folks, if isn't one thing you take away from this, keep your minds open no matter what you're in. Go out, help people. Are you going to answer the call like that guy when the phone rings? And that could be somebody looking for help in one way, or they could be your patient. So unfortunately, our time has run out. This has been fun. We'll pick this up next time. We're Recharging the Human Battery Radio, along with my co-host, Mandi Dickey, AM 950. We'll see you next week.